Hello and welcome to the Influential Times episode 20. Please say I'm joined by Jack as usual.
Hi everyone.
So for my first story for the March news, I'm going to be talking about Jack Dorsey's sale of his first ever tweet. You might have seen this in the news. He sold his first ever tweet for the equivalent of $2.9 million. It wasn't the most exciting tweet. It just simply said, just setting up my Twitter. And he actually sold it to a Malaysian businessman using the cryptocurrency Ether, which you might have heard of. The Malaysian businessman who bought the tweet goes by the name of Sina Estavi, and he compared it to buying a Mona Lisa painting. So he obviously thinks there's some value in it and some future potential. The tweet was sold as a non-fungible or fungible token, non-fungible token or NFT, which is essentially a digital certificate that states who owns a photo, video, or other form of online media. And the tweet was sold through the auction platform Valuables, which is owned by US-based company Cent. And Jack Dorsey received about 95% of the proceeds. So yeah, interesting one. I don't know if you've got any NFTs lying around at home, Jack.
No, not yet. It's kind of, I think it's kind of when blockchain technology first came on the scene, I think this was one of the sorts of things that was envisaged it being useful by people who sort of were saying it's more than just Bitcoin. And I think from a creator perspective, there's clearly something in being able to kind of go, I made something, if you're a small artist or something like that, being able to say I made something, here's the true authentic version, knowing that a lot of content gets ripped and kind of stolen or copied, and sort of people can often easily hide behind sort of lack of enforcement or copyright, different copyright jurisdictions and things like that. The idea kind of makes sense. You could be able to say, okay, this is the one true version of, this MS Paint drawing I made or whatever it is, of a kind of a piece of content potentially. And it sort of allows it to retain its value so that there is a single one. I have to say, a little concerned about some of the environmental impact of a lot of kind of blockchain and particularly cryptocurrency related transactions. I've yet to see compelling evidence myself that it isn't just sort of burning quite a lot of carbon to sort of manufacture scarcity.
Yeah,
for things that are relatively abundant, but I guess the internet generally is doing that anyway. With all our kind of everyone's chronic YouTube and TikTok habits, we're burning through a lot of carbon anyway. So it'd be interesting to see if this takes off, and if I'll maybe have a little bit of a hunt around. But sort of speaking of paying money for things that are entirely virtual, my first story is around Clubhouse. Saying that they're sort of going to introduce like a tip jar type feature to allow payments. It's not dissimilar to something like there's an app called Coffee. It kind of lets you just buy the author of something, for example, the equivalent of a cup of coffee. So sort of micro payments. So the minute Clubhouse is saying they're not going to take any, they're not going to take a cut of that. So it's interesting to see sort of Clubhouse in many ways feels, doesn't it, like it's going through sort of the phases from simply being a place where people go, like a social network, to a place where there's a creator economy, and then they're looking at ways to monetize it. And it's a journey that's taken a lot of other platforms, sometimes over a decade. And within what feels like a few months of it coming out, that they're accelerating through that. But I don't know, do you think sort of this is going to be enough to stave off the competition, or sort of letting the creators monetize in some way, or do you think they're kind of there's water already coming over the sides?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be quite enough, to be honest. I think there's a lot of one of my stories that will come up with soon around the number of platforms that we're used to using every day that are coming up with audio, like live audio, and of course they can be developing these kind of tip functionality as well. So I think everyone else is kind of catching up just as quickly, if not slightly ahead of the game, and have that sort of user base. So I'm not sure it'll be it might be one of the answers, but definitely not the definitive one.
I suppose the interesting thing comes down to scale as well. Like, how able are people to kind of throw a lot of money at the problem? Clubhouse have basically spent the month or so since they got that funding round, getting tooled up with developers and sort of hiring the level of staff you need to maintain a platform with a couple of million users. But you've got to level up. You've got people like Twitter with hundreds of millions of users moving into that space, and then the really scary, really big beasts of Facebook and Microsoft, obviously being the owners of LinkedIn as well. That's put 150 people in a room and kill off Clubhouse kind of money is what exactly. They're talking about. So I think that'll be interesting. A kind of less mentioned player, which is my second story, is I think maybe proving that enough people are now taking a bet on social audio as a category, and that probably it already existed. Podcasting is a form of social audio, I think, but that it's sort of diversifying, fragmenting a little. But it also seems very much here to stay. He's launching an app which he's calling Fireside, which is not a bad name, in my opinion. I quite like it. It's a sort of mix between podcasting and the sort of more social side, being a little bit more collaborative. A lot of screenshots have kind of leaked from pitch decks and investor decks and things like that. And interestingly, they're explicitly trying to get creators on board as kind of part of the overall ecosystem. And as a sort of founding creator on the platform, there'll be expectations on joining and engaging with other people's podcasts or rooms or whatever they end up calling it, or fireplaces, whatever it ends up being called. And I think that shows that, particularly for the challenger apps, the sort of social promotion is now seen as absolutely key, which I think is really interesting. It kind of shows people like Mark Cuban really betting on the power of kind of word of mouth and influencers and creator culture as really a sort of fundamental part of the app. And I guess that's a sign of the sort of there's real acknowledgement from sort of power brokers in the industry that it's important. Your second story is on a similar theme, isn't it? From one of the other players kind of beefing up their social audio offering.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what I alluded to earlier. Obviously, Twitter have Spaces, which is their sort of live audio feature, and they announced a couple of weeks ago that they're going to be introducing that on desktop browsers, which obviously has been one of the things that people have mentioned around Clubhouse not offering that just yet. They did, of course, introduce, it was introduced on iOS in December, and then in March it was introduced on Android, which pleases people like me and Jack. But yeah, I think it's just another kind of bid to compete for market share with Clubhouse, that they've now brought it onto desktop as well. It'd be interesting to see how the uptake is on desktop as well as on iOS and Android. They showed some of the designs last week through one of their developers on Twitter. And the other interesting thing is that lots of the other platforms that we're very familiar with, so the likes of LinkedIn, Slack, Facebook, Spotify, are all proactively working on live audio features. So although it feels like Clubhouse kind of got in there early, as you were sort of saying, Jack, there's a lot of these powerhouses that probably going to have to do a lot of work in the background, and it's going to be a challenge for Clubhouse to keep it up, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, and it's in the same month that Periscope officially shut down. I think that came in March, and was sort of rolled back into Twitter as live video. I guess it's interesting. You can sort of see the journey that functionality of sort of live video has gone through. That's now just a sort of expected functionality of apps, and it's been sort of just rolled straight back into Twitter as kind of Twitter Live, essentially as a sort of Twitter Live feature. So it feels like these kind of cycles are getting faster and faster, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like we just sort of we iterate all the way through to the final thing right away. But yeah, totally agree on on Spaces. It's just, if you've already got a decent following,
I haven't got the article in front of me. Sorry, I thought you were going to talk about it.
Tech or startup, that's all right. Sort of venture capital.
No,
so
but
Twitter,
we can just cut it from where you
sort of
went off, I think.
like it would make sense.
Sorry, mate, I thought you were going to talk about it.
Well, I'll take the existing audience that I have. I can supplement that with tweets afterwards. I can maybe have someone from my team if I'm at that sort of level of importance and influence. Yeah, I can maybe have someone kind of live tweet some of the key snippets from the space, or tweet along and react. So it kind of seems like, that lends itself better to maybe having a sort of package of content around it. If anyone listening is kind of looking for more information on what Twitter's thinking is alongside their kind of functionality set for creators, The Verge have a very good podcast called Decoder, and the head of product there was recently interviewed, and he kind of goes into some lengths about that. Or if you like my sort of very long run-on sentences, then you can also check something that I wrote for the Onalytica blog on our website. Again, kind of going into where Twitter are at, and the sort of where they sort of stand within the creator economy now. So there we go, a couple of plugs, one for someone else's content and one absolutely shamelessly for my own. So I think that is just about all we had for this week. You unearthed something interesting in big parliamentary news. And obviously, Tom is a huge fan of parliamentary procedure in general, really into all of the individual committees. And he has found something that is going on at the committee for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. So the committee have kind of put out a request for submissions of evidence on influencer culture, on how sort of people feel influencer culture exists in wider society, whether the types of people who sort of consume influencer content are aware of what's kind of going on, and whether there's sufficient public understanding of the sort of dynamic at large of money often exchanging hands for in return for sort of influencers renting out their audience. I was kind of I was a bit dismayed when I first sort of read an article about it. I thought, oh God, we all remember kind of all those senators questioning Mark Zuckerberg and some other tech executives kind of all just yelling about, kind of slightly incoherently about, like, can you tell me what's on my phone, and that kind of thing. And I sort of thought it might be a little bit like that, but actually I encourage anyone to go sort of seek out the link to submit your own ideas, because it kind of reads like someone has actually thought a little bit about the overall thing. My own 2 cents would be that the sector's already regulated by the Advertising Standards Authority and the Committee on Advertising Practice, who frequently hand down rulings. So it'll be interesting to see whether their role has changed, whether sanctions are toughened, whether regulations beefed up, or they're sort of given more scope to kind of get people banned or sanction repeat offenders more heavily. But one to keep an eye on. And if any of you feel that you kind of have something to say, I'd encourage listeners to maybe submit some evidence. We know that the sort of B2B with a slightly unloved cousin of influencer marketing. So it'd be nice if maybe those listeners who are UK residents submit their own thoughts on this. Are you going to be submitting evidence to Parliament, Tom?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Tom loves to submit evidence to Parliament.
Cool. Well, I think that's everything for this month's episode. We'll obviously put the newsletter out with the 5 stories, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, see you next time. Thanks, everyone.